and welcome to Juliet and Lucy's Quiet Leadership Revolution, the podcast for senior and aspiring leaders who want to make their voice heard and their impact felt through thoughtful, reflective, confident leadership. People who want to lead by example, bringing others with them, and who are ready to learn and adapt to deliver brilliant results. I'm Juliet Corbett.
And I'm Lucy Gower. And today we're going to talk about influencing and managing up. Interesting topic, I think, because I spend a lot of time helping people to manage up and defining what that is. That doesn't mean that you have to kind of suck up to your manager, but it's about working together. And sometimes managing up is helping your manager to do their best job in order that they can help you to do your best job. And that's how I kind of see it. Juliet, what's your thoughts about both of those terms, influencing and managing up? Because we've bunched them together as the title.
We have. So managing up, I have a slight allergic reaction to, and I think it's because it seems to imply to me, and obviously this is open for discussion in our episode today, it seems to imply to me that you're doing their job for them and that they are inadequate in some way, and therefore you have to manage up. So I actually prefer to think of it as influencing, and that in this case we're talking about influencing up, influencing the people who are above you in a formal hierarchy. But of course we know that influence also can be felt by those around you on your same peer level and those that you're leading. So influencing is a much wider topic, but here we're thinking about pointing it in an upwards direction. But for me, I much prefer the idea of influencing others than managing up, but that might just be me. What are your thoughts, Lucy?
Yeah, good point. Maybe we're talking about influencing up. I think that if you've had a bad experience, you might be managing up and you might be doing your manager's job and feeling exasperated and frustrated about it.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about managing up as a way to ensure that you are getting what you need from your manager. And that's not to say that your manager isn't doing an excellent job, but it's about being really clear about what it is that you need and being very helpful to help free up as much of their time as possible so they can do the leading and managing part. When it works well, it feels like a great partnership. But I hear you. I think that if you are listening to this and you are managing up because you're feeling frustrated that your manager isn't doing their job, that's not quite what we're talking about here today, although it's something that we can certainly pick up on another.
Absolutely. The other word that comes to mind then actually is advocating for what you need. So advocating for yourself or the people that you're leading in order to ensure that you have the things that you need to do a great job, which maybe is slightly different framing of it, maybe.
Yeah. And therefore enabling your manager to do that. So things springs to mind for me, things like, if you want to progress in a particular area, say you want to progress to be a manager, if you are clear with them about that's what you want to do, you give them the opportunity to offer you projects or bits of work where you are developing your management skills, for example. That's where I see managing up when it works.
Absolutely. Now, sometimes I wonder whether the word influencing gets a bit of a bad rep of being sort of manipulative or underhand. What are your thoughts on that, Lucy?
Yes, I think that is what happens as well, is that you're somehow being manipulative or underhand. And I see influencing as, we've all got our own lens on the world and how we see different situations. And you're not always going to see a situation with the same lens as somebody else. And it is influencing is your ability to be able to listen to the other person's perspective, to be able to share your own perspective. And the influencing bit of that is putting yourself in somebody else's shoes and thinking about what things might they need to know or understand or feel in order to perhaps see the situation from a different perspective. And I suppose if you're influencing, you want them to see it from the perspective that you sit in. That's kind of
Yeah.
where I see
No, definitely,
influencing.
absolutely. And part of that is sometimes, as appropriate, you can use persuasive techniques gently, but mostly it's about sharing an alternative point of view, explaining really clearly why you think that's useful or better or in somehow complementary to what's currently happening, and then
Yeah.
giving a clear action of what you'd like to see next. So that kind of advocating for what I need conversation, and making sure there's no blame attached to any of that partnership. It's
Yeah.
true partnership. There's no blame attached. It's just a case of figuring out together, using multiple diverse viewpoints, what's a better or innovative new way of looking at a particular challenge or particular way of doing something or particular activity that's happening at the moment.
And I think there's something around understanding the other person's objections.
Yeah.
What is it that is stopping them saying yes to the thing that you've suggested, to a new way of working, to giving you the opportunity to manage something, manage a project, I suppose, in this context. If you can put yourself in their shoes, understand what's getting in their way, then you can have a conversation about how that could or might look different.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to think of I've got so many examples. I'm trying to think of my best one that I've got up my sleeve that I can use. So while I'm thinking, I'm going to bat it back to you, Juliet. Have you got any examples of that?
Yeah, so I think the one that immediately springs to mind, just because I see it and hear it so frequently, is within the world of fundraising within education. So a lot of the conversations that I've had over the years are with expert fundraisers who are the seat of knowledge, that they are the ones who have the most expertise, the most knowledge about fundraising, and then them influencing those above them, so the head of the school, the chair of governors, the rest of the governors, the bursar, etc., in order to both educate them about how best practice fundraising works, demonstrate to them that they have adapted that best practice for the school environment in which they're working, and then presenting really concrete suggested actions of next steps of what they need, whether that's going to be resource in terms of budget, or whether it's stopping doing something that people feel is quite precious. Sometimes these feel like relatively high stakes conversations. And to some extent,
Mm-hmm.
if they don't manage to do that and have that influence over a number of years, it normally leads to that fundraiser leaving because they're not able to have the resources to actually get the momentum to deliver the results that are expected of them. So I think that's the example that comes to mind for me, is where there's a
Mm-hmm.
deep-seated expertise at a senior leadership level, but that the very highest, so the CEO equivalent, should never be expected to have that deep expertise, and yet needs to make sure they're signing off on certain budget and having certain activities and certain behaviours that they take responsibility for themselves when it comes to, for example, major gifts fundraising. That's why I've seen it most frequently. How about, I'm going to come back to you, Lucy. Has that triggered anything in terms of thoughts for you?
Mm, yeah. Yeah. So much. I think I see it a lot when there's any sort of change that needs to happen. So the thing that comes up a lot right now is around where we work, working from home, working from an office, a mixture of both. And I think that there isn't a single right answer. But what I'm seeing a lot of is that it was fine to be working remotely until, say, the last 6 months or so. And now I'm starting to see organizations say, we need you to be back in the office a couple of days a week. And this is perhaps an evolution. We all used to work in an office, then we weren't able to for a period of time. And we're all trying to figure out what's best for us, our employees, our business. But I am seeing this kind of negotiation where, on an individual level, you might have home obligations, you might have kids that you need to pick up, dogs that you need to look after, all sorts of things happening, and you've got into a routine. Your senior leadership are perhaps more looking at what the organization needs, and those two things might be slightly different. So where I'm seeing this kind of influencing piece happening is around this area a lot, and people almost proving that it can
Yeah.
still work without
Yes.
being in the office every day. And I suppose if I think about that influencing piece on a bigger scale or in a different scenario, it's about how you can take some of the risk out of those decisions for the people that you're trying to influence. The risk to the business, if we're all working from home, is that perhaps we don't connect very well and we're not productive. If we can show that we do connect, we are working well as a team and we are still meeting our targets, that opens up a conversation. But if you're not able to show the data for all of those things, that makes it harder to influence.
Yeah, absolutely. So tying that back to both of those kind of different examples, back to the previous question or the previous point that you made, one of the keys to moving in the right direction is going to be understanding what the other person's point of view is. What do they value? What challenges do they face? So in your example there about kind of hybrid working and negotiating kind of a new way of working as a team, what they value is they really want to have a low risk knowledge that the outcomes of whatever results your team is delivering, whatever that might be measured by, is still going to continue. And so as someone who's wanting to influence up, what you're then looking to do is to identify what are the key things that they really care about, and then how can you, and so lower risk, still results, trust and communication. If you can pick out kind of maximum of 5 different things that they really care about, and then when you're making your case, and whether that is in a set piece conversation or whether that is kind of drip feeding into the conversation through over time, making your case ways in which you can demonstrate that what you feel is the right direction to take actually enables them to meet those goals and those things that they really care about.
Yeah. So I think that's really well put. So there's something around getting into their shoes. You have to have a relationship with them, know them, in order to understand the things that are getting in their way, the things that are their objections. And sometimes their objections are not the things that are obvious. I talk about this, it's completely unrelated to work, but I'm hoping it illustrates the point. So many years ago, I went traveling around the world for a year with my little brother, and I wanted to learn to scuba dive. He was already a scuba diver, but when we got to this beautiful island in Thailand, I got the fear a little bit, and I didn't really want to go. I did want to go scuba diving, but I was scared to do it. I got my little brother there, kind of saying, "Oh, come on, don't be ridiculous. It's safe." But the thing that the objection wasn't about, was the equipment safe? Would it be safe to go on a boat and breathe underwater? That wasn't the thing that was worrying me. I was more worried about whether I'd be able to fit into a wetsuit and if there'd be wetsuits that would be okay for me.
Yeah.
So me getting over, so he was saying it's safe. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not worried about that. He was trying to influence the wrong thing.
Yes.
So the thing that I did to overcome my fear was to go around the different dive shops, look at what the equipment was like, and what wetsuits I thought that might be okay for me. And so you mustn't assume what the objections are. You need to dig into the detail of what they might be. Some of the things they might present as being an objection, other things might be fears that are kind of sat below the surface. And if you know them a bit, you might be able to help to uncover what those are.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great story. And the fact that some of those objections, the leader may not even be aware that is what is driving their objection. And so there's a little bit of a coaching relationship here to helping, you can't do it too openly because that might not feel right within your culture, but to actually asking the question of, okay, I'd like to have a conversation with you next week about X, Y, Z, whatever the topic it is that you're trying to influence on. What are the key questions that you would want me to answer in that? What are the key things that might stop you from agreeing to what I'm going to propose? You can give a very general sense of, I want this conversation to be about, the balance of hybrid working. Or I want this conversation to be about budget for additional staffing. What are the key questions that you're going to need me to address in order to influence this decision?
Yeah. And I think that with this, I think everything is about relationships, and it's putting in the legwork before you need to have a negotiation conversation or an influencing conversation, because we're more influenced by people that we know, like, and trust. And if we've built up some of that rapport early on, not just for when we need to influence, if you have good working relationships with your colleagues and your managers, it makes for a happier working life and more of the important work gets done. And it also does make negotiations or difficult conversations or influencing run more smoothly, because we are more influenced and we are more ready to listen when we know, like, and trust others. So putting that legwork in about having conversations is important.
Definitely. And also, I wonder whether most of the time, but maybe not every time, that this influencing up is going to go on a scale from, can I put across my point of view at the, while we're having a cup of tea in the break? Do I actually need to set up a formal conversation, all the way up to, do I need to produce a report or a paper to justify what I'm doing with data sets and so on? And then as you go through that process of it becoming more and more formalized, you're likely, if you've got a good relationship, to get to a resolution or get to some kind of next step, even if it's not the final step, before you escalate up that formality, which is going to save everybody a lot of time.
Exactly. And I think as well, so for some, so it's about the objections, but I think that we've all got our own communication styles, haven't we? And how we like to be communicated with. So in that piece around influencing, some people may want a business case and all the evidence. Others are much less formal in their communication style, and a cup of tea to chat about it is the best way forward. And everyone's different. Some people love a massive lengthy email, how are you, did you have a nice weekend? That's a really good influencing style for some. For others, it's like, as you're listening to this, you might identify whether you're hello, did you have a nice weekend, let me tell you everything, how are you, email communication person, or are you a where's what I need, where's the spreadsheet?
As you're saying that, I'm very clearly thinking in my head, I'm a get to the point person.
You're spreadsheet. I'm your spreadsheet. I'm a little bit more, how are you, did you have a nice weekend? But I'm sort of in the middle. But if you know that about the person that you're influencing, you can flex to their style. Because if you want to influence somebody who's aware of the spreadsheet and you're spending all your time trying to build rapport, asking them about their weekend, that doesn't connect as much as just giving them the spreadsheet.
Absolutely. So knowing the person and having no judgment around that, the fact that we're all different is a superpower. It's a wonderful thing about teams. So no judgment, as much as humanly possible, because obviously we all have that tendency. And then putting yourself in their shoes to understand what is it that they need, and or what objections do you need to help them overcome. Sounds like a really great way of doing it. I wonder whether then understanding that in some cases their communication style and your communication style may not mesh, and so in some cases putting it forward a proper business case is going to be required. And if, from my experience, the higher the stakes or the higher the budget that's required to make this change that you're trying to influence to happen, the more requirement that there would be some kind of paper or some kind of documentation or data set. But from my point of view, I think one of my learnings through my career has been that I default to that much more quickly than others, because I actually love getting into all that strategy detail and all the rest of it. But I would say 95% of the time, one of the goals is I need to get this decision made fast. And one of the objections is I don't have time for this. And therefore, creating lengthy, even if you do get to a formal document, keep it short, keep it really, really tight recommendations, appendices if you need them for any data and evidence, but be really clear straight up exactly what it is that you're asking for, and with a business case rationale. And that's where some of that strategy knowledge and not being daunted by strategy comes in. And I know we're going to do another episode specifically on demystifying strategy, but I think sometimes people feel if they get to the point where they need to put a business case together, they're, oh no, I don't want to do that. I can't do that. There's a self barrier that then gets erected as to why they don't want to take that next step.
Yeah. So it's interesting that you say out loud, this is what I need. We've worked together for a number of years now. I figured that out. But actually, wouldn't it have been helpful right at the start?
Although, to be completely fair, I mean, I don't know how many years we've known each other now, but probably right at the start, I wouldn't have known that about myself. So my self-knowledge has also developed over our relationship, I think, too, as well.
That's a good point.
But yes, setting it out early. what you need is really clear.
Yeah, where you do know,
Yeah.
set it out early. I know I had a job in an office in the olden days before people worked more flexibly, and there was this unsaid rule. It turned out that I only found out after I left. Don't talk to Lucy until she's finished her porridge, because that was almost like my end of porridge was signaled that now I was kind of open for conversations. Before that, I was getting ready for my day. I was doing my
Yeah.
planning. Um, Probably would have been helpful for other people if I'd have kind of been
Yeah.
clear
Yeah.
about that. And there's another thing that I wanted to say on this influencing piece, which I think is really important, which is being really clear about the why. Like, back to that thing that we've talked about several times about you're working in partnership in order to reach some common goals. Like, what is the important thing? Like, what is the point of changing something, doing something in a different way? Like, what is the shared common goal, the big why for why you're doing this
Yeah.
influencing piece? And I think that's the starting point.
Yeah. It has to be, doesn't it? And actually, that's where it can be really helpful for the person that you're trying to influence, kind of the more senior person, because everybody loses sight sometimes of the big why, the big purpose, and gets bogged down into
Yeah.
too much detail. And so while you could argue that the higher you are in leadership, the more you should be keeping strategy front and center. The reality is that most people find that quite hard. And so if you're the person in the office
Mm.
who's known for reminding everybody of their purpose, like that's not a bad thing to do just on a regular
Mm.
basis, because if you can
Mm.
frame any decision, but especially one where you need to use those powers of influencing up as, well, this is the big goal, this is what we're doing now, I think there's a better way to do this, or more efficient, more effective,
Yeah.
more a faster way of doing this.
And that agreement that you're both here for the same reason, you've got different perspectives, but you're both trying to do the same big thing is important. And I suppose the other thing, that this is the bit where I think that influencing is in a grey area, where we might say, oh, this feels manipulative. But there's something around, we've talked very rationally, and there's something around, how our human brains work, in that we don't make decisions. Our gut reaction to things is emotional, and and then our rationale backs that up. So often that big why about why we're doing something and our shared goals, there's an emotional connection within that. And I think don't
Yeah.
hold back from the emotional reasons about why you're doing something. And actually, if you're both feeling the same emotion about why something is important, that can fast track getting to a place of agreement and
Yeah, and
alignment.
if you're in some cultures, expressing that emotion is still not the default that people use. I mean, hopefully over time, people are able to
Mm.
express feelings and emotions more within the workplace, but in some cultures, that's not quite there yet. And I think one of the things
Mm.
that I've talked to coaching clients about is a great place to start is to talk about the emotion of the big goal. So you kind of get to your emotion
Mm.
through I care about this deeply because we all
Mm.
care about this big goal. And that's why I'm feeling that this is
Mm.
really, I really have an emotional response to this. So you tie it into something that everybody can agree with, and you simultaneously trigger what hopefully is their emotional connection to the big goal too. Later down the track, as your culture becomes more open, hopefully over time, to people expressing emotions and feelings, then it will become more acceptable to express a personal emotion, and that be valid in a conversation without having to connect it to the big goal. But that in some cultures, that's not going to feel natural, or maybe even
Mm.
safe in some cases.
Yeah, perhaps. Yeah, and I think that does depend on the culture that you exist in. But I think it's not just uh, the emotion about the goal. It's the
Yeah,
impact that
yeah,
you're
yeah,
making. So,
yeah,
a lot of my clients work in the sphere of doing something for a greater good. Maybe they are not-for-profit organizations. The goal is that we train up 100 people in counseling skills, but the thing to get emotional about is the impact that can have on people's lives. So I think separating out the goal and the impact is important in this influencing piece, because presumably hopefully you're both you and your manager or whoever it is you're influencing are in that organization because you care about the impact that you and the organization can make. And that's an assumption on my part, but I also have a deep-seated belief that if you work in an organization and you don't care about the difference that you're making in whatever way, then you're probably not in the right place for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's interesting actually, because I'd synonymously used goal and impact in my previous comment, which is an interesting learning for me. But also I think we're seeing in the pure for-profit area the importance of profit, people, planet, kind of triple line accounting, the importance of, or the rise of the B Corp kind of ethos and movement. I think we're seeing more and more for-profit companies actually also define impact in a much more broad way, and that is motivating people and staff and helping with retention and recruitment, and there is a big experiment going on, which I'm really delighted to see, that actually this isn't purely around a not-for-profit environment, which might be a topic for a future conversation.
100%. Like if I just think of an example here, so I'm at my standing desk that has different levels that I can put my laptop. I know that nobody listening can see that, but here I am stood up because it's better for me and my back. So if I worked for that organization, I might be like, I want the workforce that are using this desk to have better posture and feel better about themselves. I want to make a hefty profit out of it too. That's fine. They can coexist. So this isn't about in my mind, this isn't about not-for-profits, but it's about being really clear about the impact that you're making through the role that you're doing.
I think we've discovered a rabbit hole that I'd love to go down on a future episode, because this is really, really important, actually. I'm going to, however, looking at the time, bring us back to influencing
Very
up.
good, Juliet. Where's your spreadsheet? Exactly. Come
on. So let's think about some key takeaways then. So first of all, from my point of view, like, it's okay to feel like you have to manage your manager. That's normal. It's fine to phrase it as influencing up, managing up, advocating for what you need. Doesn't matter what you call it, but it is a normal, regular part of working life. Seems to be a kind of first takeaway that I guess we'd like to have. What about you, Lucy? What kind of things?
I think that, to build on something you said right at the beginning, if you're managing up, you're influencing up, doesn't mean your manager is rubbish. It means that you're working together. And I think there's something about, the practical things we've talked about. Spend time getting to know each other. It's not a one-way street either. The more that you can build relationship, understand more about what makes each other tick, the better position that you're in when there's something that you have a different perspective on, to be able to reach a kind of shared conclusion and move that forward. So it's all about relationships and putting in that time and energy early on, not just waiting for when you need to influence about something.
Yeah, definitely. And then I think those kind of steps of connecting it to your big impact and connecting it through to what the manager is looking to achieve and what the objections that they might have, and thinking it through from their point of view is a great next couple of steps. And then, as you said, always thinking about the fact you're talking to a person, not just a robot who's going to make a choice.
Exactly. And it's not like you are right and they are wrong, or the other way around. It's you both have a different perspective on this particular topic, and you're having conversations and presenting things in a different way that you can together come to a place where there's consensus.
Absolutely. So partnership and that idea of cognitive diversity driving much better decision making as well. So
exactly.
Wonderful. So as always, we love to hear your feedback. We'd love to hear about what's resonated with you from the things we've talked about today. Maybe we've missed something. Let us know. We're learning about these things as we go along as well. And really love to hear about your stories too. So things that you've tried that have maybe worked or not worked, just let us know, and then we can tailor our future episodes for what you need. So thank you for spending this time with us today. And don't forget that if we want to make our voice heard and our impact felt, we need to gift ourselves the space to think, the courage to lead, and the confidence to adapt. I'm Juliet Corbett.
And I'm Lucy Gower. We hope you'll join us next time for the Quiet Leadership Revolution.